Catch Me If You Can is a movie directed by Steven Spielberg in 2002 and starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. It is the adaptation of the autobiographical novel of the same name, Catch Me If You Can, by Frank William Abagnale Jr., published in 1980. The movie immediately became a huge success, grossing $352 million globally against a budget of only $52 million. The presence of big names in the cast has definitely helped to achieve this result, and even today, the movie is remembered as one of the best made by Spielberg in recent years. Such critical and public success led Catch Me If You Can to obtain 2 Oscar nominations, thanks to John Williams for Best Soundtrack and Christopher Walken for Best Supporting Actor in the role of Frank's father. The screenplay, written by Jeff Nathanson, has very few differences compared to the original autobiography, and those few that he implemented were always made with the consent of the real Abagnale, who attended the process to ensure its veracity. So the movie took shape, with locations identified in over 140 places between the United States and France. Such moves were actually not a problem for Spielberg, who still managed to complete filming in just 56 days. The main character of the story is the 16-year-old Frank William Abagnale Jr., played by DiCaprio, in the New York of the 60s. Precisely in 1964, he had to choose which of his 2 parents he wanted to live with, since they were about to divorce due to some marital tensions, mainly due to his father's problems with the revenue. However, Frank, rather than having to make a decision, preferred to run away. So he started a life in total independence, developing a great talent as a conman, pretending to be first an airline pilot, then a doctor, and finally a lawyer. With the name of Frank Williams and forging a pilot's license, he passed himself off as a co-pilot for the Pan Am Airline Company. It is estimated that in this role he took part in over 250 flights in 26 different countries, and during this period he had totally free stays. Instead, with the name of Frank Connors, and after having falsified a degree in pediatrics at Harvard University, he worked as a doctor in a hospital in Atlanta, where he met the nurse Brenda Strong. In order to obtain her hand, he also falsified a law graduate, and after studying for only 2 weeks, he passed the state exam and became a lawyer in Louisiana. In doing so, he managed to earn a fortune, about $2 million in less than 5 years, and to live a life of unbridled pleasures. His activity, however, didn't go unnoticed, and on his trail comes the FBI agent Ken Herrera, played by Tom Hanks, who started a frenetic manhunt. To disfavor him, there was the fact that no one seemed to know what the true identity of the swindler was, since he was constantly changing his name, his profession, and his past. In 1969, Herrera finally managed to find Frank in a small French town where his mother was born, and managed to catch him while he was printing some fake checks in a laboratory. Frank was sentenced to 12 years in solitary confinement. After serving the first 6 months right there in France in very bad conditions, he manages to be extradited to the United States thanks to Herrera himself. A few years later, he was offered a reduced sentence if he cooperated with the FBI. Frank agreed and became also a close friend of Herrera. According to the real Frank William Abagnale Jr., about 80% of what he wrote in his autobiography, to which Nathanson was inspired to write the script of the movie, remains authentic and quite accurate in its depiction of the facts. However, there are some differences between the book and the movie, and over the years he has made many comments about the authenticity of the movie. In his biography, Abagnale wrote that his father was not only a decent man without debts, but also one of his first victims. In fact, the boy's first scams involved his father's credit card, while in the movie this doesn't happen. In reality, Frank is the third of 4 children. In the movie, he is the only son. In reality, Frank used 8 different identities created by him, while in the movie only 3 of them are represented: pilot, doctor, and lawyer. Under the name of Frank Adams, he forged a degree at Columbia University and had the opportunity to teach sociology for a semester at Brigham Young University. However, in the movie, the only scene that recalls this identity is when, even before becoming a conman, he impersonated the substitute French teacher at his school, giving lessons for 1 week, unbeknownst to anyone. In reality, Abagnale left the profession of pediatrician after having almost let a child die because of his inexperience in that field, and then, with the name of Robert Black, he falsified a law degree and then passed the exam to profess in Louisiana. So, at the age of 19, he found himself working in the most important law office in the state. However, in the movie, he stopped being a doctor only to become a lawyer and work in Brenda's father's office, hoping to get into his good graces and marry his daughter. In reality, after escaping, he never saw or spoke to his father again in his entire life. Spielberg, however, decided to include 2 scenes in which the 2 meet again to help the narrative. Another dynamic in Catch Me If You Can that differs from reality is the relationship between Frank and the FBI agents. They chased Abagnale from time to time, but he never had such a personal relationship with any of them, as he did in the movie with Henretti, and says, "I didn't call them every Christmas, I didn't want the FBI to know where I was." However, also this one was a Spielberg's choice. In this way, he was able to give more visibility to an actor of the caliber of Tom Hanks, since he played a secondary role. Moreover, unlike in the movie, Frank never ended up on the FBI's wanted list since it's reserved only for violent criminals. The real FBI agent who hunted Frank was named Joseph Shea. In the book, his name is Sean O'Reilly, while in the movie it's Carl Henretti. Since Shea was still working for the FBI when Catch Me If You Can was published, Frank rightly decided not to include his real name. In conclusion, the movie almost perfectly represents Abagnale's unbelievable and fascinating story, with minor differences well calibrated by Nathanson and Spielberg to ensure its authenticity and usability for the audiences.